But Carenostics' mission is to hit it all. Now might be the time to actually make that happen. And most importantly, we're doing the right thing for the patient. Founder will say fundraising is much more an art than a science. Take 1 to 2 months where all you're doing is fundraising before you're fundraising. If you give someone infinite amount of time, they will find a reason to say no. The biggest problem in healthcare is incentives. Can we make data-driven healthcare a reality?
Welcome to our first episode of Digital Health Interviews in 2025. And we've had a lot of people from digital health community, investors, doctors, digital health influencers. But my favorite type of interviews is with startup founders in digital health. And that's exactly what kind of episode we're going to have today. So I'm super excited to introduce our today's guest. His name is Kanishka Rao. Hi, Kanishka.
How's it going, Alex?
Good, good. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here.
Let's start with the intro. Tell us everything that happened to you before Carenostics.
Well, I grew up in Philly, and at the time of recording this, Eagles just had a big playoff win. So very happy day in Philadelphia. Grew up there, went to undergrad, and my master's program there was at Penn, studying a dual degree in management and technology. So did my undergrad and master's in computer science, and my management degree from Wharton. Then didn't actually have the healthcare bug back then, but went into consulting to figure out what industry I wanted to do. So spent 4 years at McKinsey in New York, where we are now, and along the way fell in love with healthcare and with startups. And very cool opportunity presented itself to combine those two while I was there and actually start McKinsey's North America healthcare startups practice. So bringing the knowledge they had working with all the biggest payers, providers, pharma, to the people trying to go penetrate and innovate in that market, which is really what we all know who work in healthcare needs. And so that was the journey. But then towards the end of that, a couple of years ago, my grandfather unfortunately passed away from kidney failure, and didn't know he had chronic kidney disease until his kidneys failed. And that's unfortunately, we found out, a very common occurrence. 80% of people with kidney disease don't know they have it. And a lot of them, there's so much you can do to slow or stop that disease progression if you find them earlier. Problem is, most of them don't find out until preventative interventions are too late and, irreconcilable damage is done. And so it was with that in mind that, my dad and I started talking. And my dad, Bharat, is a PhD in AI from before the buzzwords, and spent his whole career innovating in healthcare. It's like 70 AI patents in healthcare from his time leading Siemens and KPMG's healthcare AI groups. And then in talking together, we both clearly agreed that this was the most important problem in healthcare. Is how do we find these patients earlier who you can actually transform their lives if you can find them and intervene earlier? And it felt clear to us that, things were happening and now might be the time to actually make that happen. And so it's with that mission that we founded Carenostics to leverage AI and data and technology to help identify these opportunities for earlier intervention, and then work in partnership with health systems to get those interventions to happen earlier.
I have so many questions.
Okay.
To be honest, while I was preparing to this interview, I watched some of your interviews before. I read a lot of material. The story of Carenostics sounds like good to be true. And I want to figure out how you managed to do so much in such short period of time.
Well, thank you. I can't take the credit. I think it's attributed to a lot of things. When we were starting at the end of COVID, obviously the world was very healthcare minded in terms of what's going on. And then very soon after we started, ChatGPT arrives, and AI both becomes commonplace, but also takes on a different meaning. Now when you say AI, it means generative LLMs, that kind of stuff. Right. Whereas, the stuff my dad got his PhD in, machine learning, the statistical stuff, is a different thing than what they're expecting. Right. but really it's because of, the awareness created about AI that a lot more people were excited to innovate as we got into this space. And so, we started with a very clear mission. And I think clinical decision support and things like that to find chronic disease patients earlier, people have tried iterations of this over the years. And one of the biggest things we knew is how do you get people to care, right? Like coming out of COVID, half the hospitals had negative margin. They don't have money for this. Payers increasingly have these these shorter term time horizons for the ROIs they're looking for. And people get stuck in pilots and hell. And it was really an innovation on the business model side that gave us the confidence to enter this space of, what if we align with some of the pharmaceutical companies early on, and they benefit immediately if they've created an innovative new drug that is the right thing for all these patients and it's on the guidelines and everyone accepts that it's what should be done. Growing the market grows, is the true win-win-win in healthcare, where the pharma company, benefits from more patients, opportunities to get on their products. The payer benefits because the long-term cost of care goes down. The provider benefits because you're helping them treat their patients and keep them out of the ER, and more effectively treat their patients and get better outcomes. And most importantly, we're doing the right thing for the patient.
There are rumors that pharma companies and health systems, at least in this country where value-based care is still slow to be adopted and there's still fee-for-service model, they don't really want to spend a lot of money for prevention, because even for pharma, yes, they might sell some drugs to prevent the disease, but there's a higher chance they're going to be more money if a person gets to the level of chronic condition and then treat him for many, many years with their drugs.
It depends on the condition, and you're right. That's the biggest problem in healthcare is incentives, right? Because there's cynical views of, it's very much in the news right now, but there's views everywhere of, even if incentives make sense for a company in the long term, is that executive going to be there long enough to care about it and enter into those programs? But fundamentally, people go into healthcare because they want to do good. They want to help patients. And there's different incentives. You're right. Like companies that really focus on end of life treatment do benefit from more patients going there. Hospitals can't get rid of their ER revenue because primary care is a loss leader in terms of how their finances work. But it is the case that I think more and more people are recognizing this and models are changing. And obviously certain pharmaceutical companies, like the brands kind of operate independently. So if one brand has a priority to go earlier, it's not like they might not have the other brand that's further down the life cycle of that patient in terms of sponsoring this. But it's really can you get the right players around the table, because you're helping. At the end of the day, we want to help the frontline physician do what they want to do. That's truly the partner at the end of the day. And those people, regardless of business model, whatnot, want to do what's best in their patient. They just have very real constraints on their time and resources in order to be able to do that. So if you can build a solution to do there and creatively figure out whether it's the health system, the payer, the pharma company, foundations, software players, med tech players, whoever else might benefit, I think that's how we're going to transform healthcare. And what's interesting is if you look at, the use cases where people start, typically, it's the stuff where it is a moneymaker for everyone. Oncology, for example. The health system makes money, the pharma company makes money, the payer, has to treat them and wants to treat them better. But there's so many companies in that space. And then similarly, as every time regulation comes out, quality metrics around hypertension and diabetes, quality readmission penalties around heart failure and COPD. You see a flood of companies to those. And it's because, everyone wants to do these things. Everyone's been waiting to help get these patients better. And now there are the incentives in place where you can actually do that. But Carenostics' mission is to hit it all. Start with something, start in areas where there isn't necessarily a payer or government mandated incentive, but find the creative way to make an incentive. to give those doctors what they need to treat their patients best.
I love that. Let's make a step back and go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, you started with a grant to
Yeah.
do a proof of concept?
Yeah, so our first funding was from the National Science Foundation, a small business innovation research SBIR grant. And that was a great way to give us the confidence of, hey, let's really dive into this. My dad leaving KPMG where he was a senior partner, me leaving McKinsey, and sort of saying, yeah, let's get into this.
So my question is, for that proof of concept, where did you get the data to train the model to find those patients?
Yeah, so we partnered with health systems that wanted to innovate with us. We actually had a short partnership with Penn initially to do some of the proof of concept work, and then quickly found our long-term partner in Hackensack Meridian Health, where we worked with them to help their very motivated and innovative clinical departments identify these undiagnosed chronic disease patients earlier and help get them tested, diagnosed, and treated.
So a lot of startup founders are going to listen to this and they're like, how is that possible? How is a startup that nobody heard of before comes to a health system, a very large one, and like, hey, give me your data and I'm going to train a model on? Is that because you had like really good personal relationship with some of the executives? Because usually health systems don't just give access to their data to anyone.
Yeah, and they certainly wouldn't to me. But that's where the benefit of having my co-founder definitely comes in. And you made the kind comment of how much we've done in a short period of time. A lot of it is attributed to the credibility my dad has of a lot of people are talking about healthcare AI. I've done it for 30 years. Like, I know what I'm talking about, and I can help talk to you in the way that actually understands the realities from having deployed AI at 1,000 health systems over my career. And so coming in with that, allowed us to hire a very credible team off the bat. We have, CTO who was, the senior director of Cerner's Pop Health platform, a chief R&D officer who was the EVP of analytics for Concert AI, our head of data who was senior architect at Alexa Health. We got these people, day one, and that allowed us to not only establish credibility to work with someone really innovative to say, like, listen, we're here to push it forward and establish the credibility of our mission of we're not going for where makes the most money first. We're starting with a deeply personal mission that makes, motivates us a lot with the story of my grandfather and chronic kidney disease, and aligning with the clinicians, the stakeholders, everyone throughout that journey, and then the expertise to actually deliver it when we get there.
Once you got this approval, a green light from the health system executive, do you need to go separately to EHR, like to Epic, to Cerner, and tell them, hey, we have this agreement with Penn, give us access to your database?
Yeah, it depends how you do it, right? Like, if you are plugging into the EMR, you need some sort of a relationship. Like, we have a Smart on Fire app that we're deploying with Epic. And, if you were going to implement directly into Epic yourself, you need some sort of vendor agreement where you're allowed to actually use Epic. Because obviously Epic is the 8,000-pound gorilla in the room with everything in these, especially these large health systems.
Right.
And what are they doing? What are they, not doing? Where are they promising and going on their roadmap? There's a lot to navigate there. But no, we work with the health system on the data they have, not necessarily an Epic on the front end. And if there are things on the front end, we have our Smart on Fire app, or the health system, sometimes they've used their resources to implement an interface or something like that.
Got it. Can you lead me through the patient experience working with your product? Well, actually, patient is not working directly, but for example, I do my yearly physical, I go to my PCP, and when I come to the office, my doctor pulls up my information in the EMR, and then on the background, your solution starts to analyze all my data and like red flag doctor that this guy might have some serious problems?
To an extent, yeah. You captured it pretty well. For people who come in for their annual visits, honestly, there is less like basic testing needed. The unfortunate reality is the majority of patients come in when they're sick,
Right.
and are not there long enough to do all the tests that they should be doing. Even basic blood work isn't done frequently enough. And so it's a lot of those patients are the ones that fall through the cracks, that detect a chronic disease too late. And a lot of our work, but our solution works on all the populations, essentially exactly as you described. We're constantly running on all the available data that we have, diagnoses, procedures, labs, vitals, medications, notes, claims, you name it, basically. And taking into account building predictive models and learning models on who's most likely to have this undiagnosed condition if tested today. And using that to then give those risk factors back to the physician for them to make their decision on, do I want to test, diagnose, or treat this patient? You don't want to flag every patient who has a risk factor, right? When we're talking about, say, kidney disease, every diabetic, hypertensive, obese, elderly patient, that's more than half your population has a risk factor. But it's getting from, rather than those million patients down to here the say 50,000 that I really think you should test because I think they have the disease. And, the model, we just published a model in ASN this year, last year with Hackensack Meridian, and it showed, we had like a 95% AUC in predicting undiagnosed chronic kidney disease.
That's impressive.
Thank you.
Got it. Going back to your collaboration with health systems, what kind of challenges did you face starting this journey?
So I think there's, what we talked about of the incentive challenge is where do you find the right stakeholders who have the right problem at the right time? The first wave of AI in healthcare, everyone knew was going to be on the administrative side. And you're seeing technologies like AI scribes, take off. People are getting great adoption. People are loving them. And so it's, and then, there's rev cycle solutions, there's billing solutions, there's coding solutions, all those things are coming out. And, it's when is a health system ready to move into clinical use cases, and for what are they willing to move into that side? Ultimately, I think most people who are working in healthcare know that is, I've heard everyone saying that's where it's going to go. Obviously, at some point, we are going to be able to take into account all the data we have to make decisions. And so different systems at different times have different priorities. One health system may say, to what we were talking about earlier, I want to work on these use cases where there's a direct sort of financial reason for me to also find these patients earlier. And the other conditions will be sort of in the long tail of where I go after that. Other ones who are, maybe more research institutions really want to be on the cutting edge of what's best in class for a certain kind of patient. And then weighing this all against, again, what we talked about with Epic is how do you stay complementary? You don't want to be competitive with Epic in this market.
For sure.
It's like helping the health system achieve additional goals beyond what they're already achieving with their existing software.
All right. Have you started using any Gen AI tools? And if yes, what for?
Yeah, the shortest answer is it's the best tool for notes and understanding them. So if the health system has that available in their environment where we work on their data, that helps us extract the relevant insights much quicker than using other things. But there's certainly many applications we could think of. As you get into actually delivering the care, agentic AI becomes more relevant, and if that's an area we might go into, specific safety recommendations or communication to patients or to physicians, using an LLM or something like that could be the best way to do that and personalize that to each patient. Where we've been clear is our position is generative AI is not the right tool to do some of this predicting because of the risk of hallucination and things like that in a healthcare context are much more costly, and a much more statistical, rigorous, reproducible approach is one we're trying to take, and we think is appropriate for solving these problems.
Let's talk about business model. you said that it's innovative in some sort as well, not just the solution, but the business model. Tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone who's trying to do work in healthcare has to find a fun way to make the incentives line up. And so for some of our early use cases, Bayer was our first investor outside of the NSF. And it was because there was an alignment of, if we can find more patients with undiagnosed chronic kidney disease, the market can grow for the therapeutics that they have, right? They have the leading non-steroidal MRA for that area. And so it was finding out that the alignment with pharma was there for identifying more of these patients earlier. I think a lot of people have done business models with pharma on the R&D side of, are you finding patients for drug discovery or for clinical trials, or real world evidence publications and things like that. But moving into, just aligning with commercial marketing budgets was something we started with and found success with. And then to the point of, as you demonstrate success, wherever you can find that initial catalyst of funding, be it a grant, pharma, payer, provider, you show the results to everyone else. And that starts the snowball of how do you align to the incentives of everyone else.
So you mentioned Bayer is one of your investors, and pretty fast you were able to raise your seed round, right?
Yes.
Well, tell us, your network, did that help? I assume you did not just send like a cold emails with the pitch deck to everyone in this industry.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think figuring out how to get plugged into the startup environment, because it was not a network I had. Transparently, all my friends from Wharton are investment bankers or private equity bros,
Right.
and so or tech bros from my computer science friends. And so getting plugged into the startup ecosystem, VCs, before many of my friends had gone into startups was something I had to figure out. And so tapped into a bunch of great networks, obviously the ex-Penn network, the ex-McKinsey network, found a couple of great friends early on who had jumped into the VC world and helped me plug in. And yeah, I think it's so fun that over the years now in New York of being part of the startup ecosystem, living with 3 other startup founders here, you start to, everyone you see at these events start to be friends more and more than just people you're cold pitching. But that first time through, a lot of it was my first time meeting someone, and it was strategically figuring out how to get a warm intro to everyone. So I think the biggest advice I'd give anyone going out first time founder for a fundraise, that was the best advice I got by far, is like take 1 to 2 months where all you're doing is fundraising before you're fundraising. And that's not necessarily sending out emails and pitch decks to VCs, maybe 1 or 2 friendly conversations, but the majority of it is lining up everyone to run your process when you're ready to run it. And that way you can hit, 20, 30 people in a week. And really, one thing I'll say is, I think the concern a lot of people has is what's the impetus to get someone to close? Because here's the reality, right? As a seed stage company, there are holes in your business. There are open questions that are hard that someone needs to believe in. And if you give someone infinite amount of time, they will find a reason to say no, just by the nature of being early.
Right.
And so if you can hit a lot of people at once and run a competitive process, then you have people who actually have an incentive to get to close sooner and move you through that process. Now, it obviously helps to have a signed contract, a paying customer already, have other credible folks on your cap table, have a very credible team, market expertise, domain expertise, right to win, and early traction and partners. But yeah, I think as every founder will say, fundraising is much more an art than a science.
Let's look ahead. What's on the roadmap of the product? What do you want to implement in the near future? And also in terms of diseases, which disease you want to target?
Yeah. So last year was an amazing year for us in terms of R&D on the platform and solution. We'd built this platform to be able to generalize around conditions, and last year we demonstrated it. I think we had 5 publications ranging from chronic kidney disease to asthma to pediatrics, and now we're moving into cardiology as well. So we're starting to demonstrate that extensibility of the platform and starting to add more partners we're working with on this journey. And I think that's really the goal in 2025. Our vision at Carenostics is to do this for everything. Can we make data-driven healthcare a reality? Can we help doctors harness all the data they have that they simply do not have enough time to go through, and help them get the data that's most relevant to them that they want to make the decisions that they want to make earlier? And that's our mission, and that's how you stop the story of my grandfather from repeating itself. So this year, would love to work with more innovative partners, whether they have, we want to support health systems in running these quality initiatives, these quality improvement initiatives in clinical areas. As they think about bringing data and technology and AI into clinical decision making and the clinical side from the administrative side, we want to be that partner that helps them do it sort of soup to nuts. Now that we've done it a couple times in a couple different areas, help them stand up the clinical programs that can actually leverage AI and see the improved patient outcomes from it.
For you right now, what's higher priority? Trying to approach larger health systems or start small?
Yeah, it's a great question. And as you alluded to with an earlier question, we kind of started in reverse. Most folks start with a small health system or two, or independent hospital. There's massive pros and cons of both, right? Like when you work with the small health system, it's much easier. You might get more face time with the physicians and clinicians. You might get more feedback. You might have less red tape when you're trying to do new things and try things. And you start to sell to those people and figure out how to sell to them, and you 100% have faster sales cycles than the big guys. But obviously working with large health systems, you get the access to data, sufficient data to build high quality models. You get access to cross-functional specialists, right? So you can build a solution that isn't just for the kind of patient that, one physician group might treat, but for the whole hospital, and actually work on the complex problem of the interactions between those groups and how patients do fall through the cracks and where you can find them. For us, I think having demonstrated, like I mentioned, a bunch of publications last year in clinical conferences, CHEST, AMGA, ACAAI, ASN, EMERSA, there's a lot more interest now in, we've shown some of this stuff works, now we want to do it with more partners. And so innovative health systems ready to move into this space. I think we have capacity to add a couple more this year, and that's what we'll be looking to do.
Great, good luck with that.
Thank you, sir.
Well, let's talk for a sec about you personally as a startup founder or co-founder in the company. So it's fourth year right now for Carenostics?
Oh, no, we're coming up on 3.
Oh, 3, okay. Yeah. So you're still fairly early in terms of your startup journey.
Yeah, I feel it.
Well, again, you've accomplished a lot over these 3 years. Obviously, you and your father, both of you, have a lot of strong sides. What do you think is your weak side right now? Well, besides starting a fire, I know that.
That took a minute. I'm glad we kept that off camera.
But yeah, what do you think you would like to improve within the next year or two in terms of personal development?
It's a great question. I think there's, we've done founder-led sales up until now. And that's been the area I've been in charge of, both on, the payer, provider, pharma side. But I think starting to elevate to more of going from an individual contributor to a team leader, because we have, we've got a bigger team and they're experts at what they do. And so focusing them in the right areas and prioritizing for the whole organization is going to be critical, especially, as we start looking to, we're a seed stage company. We're supposed to experiment and iterate on things like that. But as we look to, hey, we've got a Series A coming up, in a year or two, because we want to do this for more and more partners and expand into more areas. So where do we really need to focus and prioritize, I think, is something I'm trying to work on. And then I think, all founders, whether they admit it, and actually they all admit it to each other, have a deep set of imposter syndrome, in everything you do. Am I working enough? Am I putting in what I need to get this business going? So it is both doing enough that I feel proud of it and, managing sort of the mental health aspects of it. A lot of my goals this year, like New Year's resolutions wise, are around health, both mental and physical, because I think, yeah, it's a demanding job, not physically, but I think how much you care really makes you think a lot more about it and what you're doing for it, and if you're doing everything you possibly can for it, for your team, for your investors, for your partners, and most importantly, when you're a mission-driven company like us, for the patients that we're trying to help.
At the very end, I asked my guests to give some sort of recommendation to startup founders in digital health, and you already shared a few advices. Can you tell us the last one? What would you recommend them to do?
I'd just say that all the canonical wisdom is true. Like everything you hear is 100% true. Stay close to your customers, talk to them, iterate with them, focus on PMF over sales, focus on your team and use the advantages you have as a startup over an incumbent, right? They have more resources, they have more people, they have more expertise. You can make decisions quicker, you can iterate quicker, you can get things out and test things quicker. If you're not doing those, you are not using your advantages over the incumbents.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alex.